Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock, and I should commence this meeting of the Development Control Committee of Basingstoke Borough Council in virtual session. For the benefit of the members of the public watching or participating in this meeting, I'd like to explain who everybody is. My name is Councillor Paul Miller, and I'm the chairman of the committee. This committee meeting is being held virtually in accordance with the Council's rules for virtual meetings, which reflect the recently published government regulations implementing the Coronavirus Act. The meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and will also be available to view after the meeting is finished. Councillors who sit on this committee and who may be making the decision on the application before us are identified by name on the screen. Can I ask the officers who will be advising the committee to introduce themselves and their role?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Townsend. I'm the Planning and Development Manager.
Bernadette, I'm Democratic Services Officer.
Greg Chapman, Assistant Planning Manager.
Emma Bethel, Lawyer, Legal Services.
Right, thank you very much. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and not a political meeting. The committee will be assessing the material brought before us and listening to the representations made, and will make decisions based on planning reasons. In reaching these decisions, we are guided by national and local planning policy and guidance. I understand that planning decisions can be emotive, and ask that everybody remains polite and professional and patient throughout this meeting in case of any slight delay in presentations. Can I now remind both members and officers of some of the procedures that we'll be using as this meeting is virtual. Unless speaking, officers will have their videos switched off to provide clarity as to who the committee members are for those watching and participating. At this point, can I ask all officers present to switch off their video? The officers present will only switch their video link on during the item that they are presenting or where they wish to be invited to speak by me as chair. For this virtual meeting, councillors should observe the normal rules of behaviour under the Member Code of Conduct and ensure that they are not disturbed during the meeting. Can members ensure that their mobile phones are now switched off or turned to silent? Can members of the committee turn on their video link during the meeting and keep their microphones muted unless they are invited to speak by myself as chair? Members are reminded that if they switch off their video link or move away from the camera, they will be treated as leaving the meeting and will not be able to take part in any vote on the item under discussion. Members can indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand and should only speak when I, as chair, invite them to do so. When we move into debate of the application, may I ask all members to avoid repetition and keep their comments on each agenda item to a maximum of 4 minutes. As chair, I will confirm the name of any visiting speaker at the appropriate time in the agenda before they address the committee by audio link. Councillors who declare that they are leaving the meeting and switch off the video link if they have an interest that they need to declare or if they have predetermined any item on the agenda. They can then switch on their video link again when I call the next agenda item. Where a member of the committee has a predetermination position on an application and is registered to speak under the public speaking scheme, they will stand down from the meeting and will only be able to participate as a visiting councillor by audio link. They will then rejoin the meeting as a member of the committee once the application has been determined. At the appropriate time, I will invite speakers to contribute to the meeting by audio link in the order set out on the update paper, but I reserve the right to reorder the speaking in the event that technical difficulties occur. I will ask each speaker to confirm their name and interest in the item before commencing their contribution. I would ask that points made by visiting speakers are material planning considerations relating to fact. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and to keep points made on the application to material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. Voting will be taken by a roll call, and I will confirm the recommendation that is to be voted upon before the voting begins. When each member unmutes their microphone to vote, can they leave a small pause before speaking to allow their vote to be heard? Can each member then indicate whether they are for, against, or whether they wish to abstain on the recommendation presented? Hopefully, we will not have any IT problems, but can I remind councillors that if their connection is lost, that they should immediately advise the Democratic Support Officer and use their meeting link to access the meeting again. Thank you for that. It's rather long, but rather necessary. I now move on to the main agenda for the committee meeting this afternoon. And apologies for absence of substitutions. I have one notified absentee, and that is Councillor James Breckham. Are there any declarations of interest? I see none. There are no urgent matters to be presented. We look now at the minutes of previous meetings. That I will move the minutes of the meeting of the 1st of July to be signed as a correct record, unless there is a question of accuracy or inaccuracy. Thank you. I take that as accepted. The minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of July 2020 will be approved at the Development Control Committee meeting to be held on the 12th of August. Move on to applications for planning permission this afternoon, and if I could ask Mr. Chapman to present the golf course.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an outline housing.
Sorry, just before you do, Greg, could I ask that Councillor Julian Jones checks in if he just hangs fire until we've presented the application, then I'll call you forward, Mr. Jones. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an outline housing-led planning application at Basingstoke Golf Course, Winchester Road, Basingstoke. It is for the demolition of all existing buildings and the removal of the existing hard standing and the development of up to 1,000 homes, a local centre, a day nursery and local retail uses, formal and informal open space, sports provision, a gypsy and traveller pitch, pedestrian and cycle links, noise barriers and vehicular access from Winchester Road. It is an allocated site in the local plan for 1,000 houses. All matters are reserved for later approval, except for access. Given the outline nature of the application, there are 5 plans for approval only. These are access plans, as this is the only matter which is not reserved for later approval, and high-level parameter plans. Indicative plans discussed within the agenda report and on the visualiser are not for consideration or approval. The plans that are for approval are at pages 179 to 182 of the agenda report. It may be useful to turn to these within your agendas now. Page 179 shows the access strategy for the site, including the approved Hounston Fields roundabout and approved 4th arm access to the golf course. The token crossing, approved in principle with the Hounston Fields approval, is also shown. The proposed secondary access into the site from the A30 is shown as a left-in only access. A footway cycleway connecting the approved roundabout access, the secondary access, and then connecting onwards to the existing footpath network, and 2 pedestrian accesses to the east of the site on Beggarwood Lane, providing access towards Beggarwood facilities and the existing bus stops, and Squirrel Drive, providing access towards the right-of-way network and recreational routes, are also demonstrated. Page 180 shows the final secondary left-in access at the top of the page and the temporary secondary access arrangements at the bottom of the page, which would be delivered in the event that the Hounston Fields development, and thus the roundabout construction, did not occur or was not completed before the golf course comes forward, to ensure that the golf course development is not beholden on the actions of others. Page 181 shows the high-level land use and access plan, which includes the access points, commitment to buffers, and the location of residential and all other mixed uses. This is to be read in conjunction with the trees and buildings parameter plan on page 182, showing buildings to be removed, trees to be retained, including woodland, boundary and buffer trees, all veteran trees, category A trees apart from 3 to allow access creation, and 2 additional trees considered by the council to be veteran trees. Other trees may be removed or retained, depending on the detail of the reserve matters applications and the proactive refinement of the temporary site tree preservation order. If I could draw members' attention now to the update paper. This provides details of an additional third-party objection and additional objection comments from Cycle Basingstoke, and responds to these additional objection points with reference back to the agenda report. Provides 2 minor corrections to the agenda report. Provides detail and pulls together a summary in respect of the application and applicant position on climate change with reference on these various aspects back to the agenda report. Confirms the position with respect to the overarching landscape ecological management plan and the documents that it will include. Clarifies the extent of uses within the community hub. Confirms the position with respect to the eastern accessibility connections, which would functionally allow cycle use, but for legal reasons can only be considered as pedestrian accesses. Clarifies the position with respect to the hourly bus service and anticipated route, and notes the parallel provision for Hounston Fields. Notes the applicant position with regard to the timing of the first provision of the bus service at 500 occupations. It does not agree to this, noting policy requirements, although also recognising that a change to the agenda recommendation for provision prior to first occupation to provision at around or circa 100 occupations would also be early within the development. And thus the recommendation is changed in this respect, and members are asked to consider this. And then it also notes the later provision at Hounston Fields, and the final timing would also be subject to any agreement with any service operator. Then the conditions in the update paper, it changes condition 6 in respect of the climate emergency to include a requirement for details of carbon savings for monitoring and measuring. Changes condition 10 to reflect and agree with the applicant's change to the submission to achieve a net gain in canopy cover in respect of trees in response to the climate emergency. Changes condition 39 to reflect that the use of an access can occur prior to adoption, but after the agreement of the Highway Authority, and confirms that no change is to be made to condition 41, as the applicant has not provided details of why this is necessary, and notes that the condition allows for flexibility if this detail is provided in the event, and that's around the temporary use of the existing access for the construction of the secondary access. It also includes an additional 13th informative to reflect the motion of full council for planning permissions to include informatives regarding the climate emergency. Thank you, Chairman. Nothing further to add.
Thank you, Greg. And members, I think the content of the update paper is quite important to note today because of all those particular aspects that are covered, addressing some of the later objections and the various articles that we've and subjects that we've mentioned within council outside of the Development Control Committee that now are being incorporated in every application that comes through the system. Some of the wording will have to be manipulated, but it's worth noting the principle on which we're trying to stick to here. Mr. Jones from Dummer Parish Council, you have 4 minutes, sir.
Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear, Julian.
Good, okay. Thanks for allowing me to address the committee this afternoon. At the local plan stage, Dummer Parish Council resisted the inclusion of Hounston Fields and the Basingstoke Golf Club. Both sites are a long way from the town's amenities and in the Test and Itching catchment area. It's clearer that their inclusion would place unrealistic demands on the local infrastructure, the M3 junctions 7 and 8, the A30 corridor, the sewage network, water supply and power. We now see the complications of delivering these sites. The A30 corridor requires upgrades to Brighton Hill, Kempshott and Hatchwarren roundabouts and improvements to the Southwood Junction traffic lights, as well as upgrades to some sections of the foul water network close to the carriageway. The infrastructure delivery plan dated 2017 shows that this roundabout work should have been completed in 2019. Surface water flooding and concerns over nitrates reaching Southampton water also need to be addressed. When the M3 is closed between junctions 6 and 7, the A30 is the only relief route. There's no viable route south of the M3. This already causes problems for residents of Longacre who cannot get home when these events occur. The plan for you doesn't include the alternative access from Beggarwood that was in the early illustrative plan. In the local plan, the illustrative plan for these three sites, Kennel Farm, Longacre, which is now Longacre, the golf course and Hampshire Fields, show the relationship between these sites. Policy SS 312 required development brief for the golf club, which in turn requires the infrastructure delivery plan, which should have brought these things together. Kennel Farm is close to completion, but Hampshire Fields still hasn't discharged its surface water and foul water condition 17, which requires it to have plans for those things. Thames Water has limited the golf club site to 50 houses, increase from the original 50 houses they committed to. Failure to deliver main sewer connections could result in tankers transporting the raw sewage from Hampshire Fields and the golf course to Chinham. By the way, development of the island site with its sewage load was not envisaged at the time of the local plan. There should be some linkage of delivery of the primary school and the golf course delivery to avoid all 1,000 houses being completed without delivery of the primary school. I realise this is also subject to Hampshire County Council's education plans. We know that they failed to deliver a school at the Beggarwood site. Connection via an at-grade crossing is certainly not a safe way for the children to cross between the golf club and Hampshire Fields. The members of Basingstoke Golf Club are receiving significant sums of money for this site. It's important the quality of life of other Basingstoke residents isn't harmed by this development.
You have 1 minute.
On April 6th, Hampshire Highways stated that £43 million was required for the improvements to the A30 corridor, of which the golf club is only contributing 8.5 million. I don't have time to discuss the viability of a public transport system that can only run once an hour, but I urge you to require delivery of the A30 highway improvements with closure of the construction access right turn as soon as the main access roundabout is complete, plus completion of the mitigation measures to the downstream foul water network prior to occupation of the houses. That's it.
Thank you very much, Julian. And if you'd just like to hang on there, I'll ask members, any questions to the Parish Council? Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you, Julian, for a very well-informed, well-briefed presentation. I just had one particular question. You might have the answer to this. So in your view, we are considering 1,000 houses today, and other houses, you mentioned Hampshire Fields. In your view, should these be considered in the round together? And what is the main deficiency? I mean, you mentioned the Toucan crossing, and you also mentioned sewer provision. What is the main deficiency that you see with this application as it stands?
Yeah, it really is the A30 problems. As I say, we've seen the difficulties of the Longacre site, the Kennel Farm site, as it was called in local plan, that its only access is onto the A30, and we know that typically at least once a year and sometimes 3 times a year we get major incidents on the M3 which can cause several hours of closure and make it almost impossible for people to get home to those sites which only have access. As I say, in the original plan, there was a concern about rat running if it was open, but there was going to be vehicle access onto Longwood Copse Lane. I still think it'd be desirable to have some sort of bollard that could be removed, so at least emergency vehicles could get into the site from that route, because that would provide an alternative. As I say, the other problem is, I think on Longacre, the problems have been mostly in the way that the site's constructed, that they've had backing up of their sewage system. But I believe there has been a problem between the Fairways site and the connection somewhere close to the co-op, which was part of the sewage network. As I say, I'm not sure what provision was made for the island site with its 70 apartments and its care home and the pub. But certainly I'm concerned that there will be some major problems with the downstream sewage network. So those really are the main things. But as I say, the biggest concern is the A30 corridor, whether people can actually get home or get out when they need to.
Thank you.
Any more questions for the Parish Council, Dummer? No, thank you very much, Julian.
Okay.
Right, I'd like to call forward Mr. Alice Davidson from the applicant.
Hello?
Hello, Alice.
Hello,
Good
can you hear
afternoon.
me? Is that okay, that level of volume?
Alice?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, brilliant, okay.
I understand you have your team with you.
Yes, I do. I have 2 representatives from Bloor Homes and a number of consultants with me in case of specific questions.
Understood. Thank you very much. You're now addressing the committee and you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Alice Davidson and I'm a planning consultant at Boyer Planning. I'm speaking today on behalf of the applicant, Bloor Homes, who are the leading privately owned house builder in the country. Bloor Homes are delighted that, having worked closely with your officers on this application, they've been able to respond to and address all the issues arising, and that the application is presented to you today with your officer's recommendation to grant planning permission. Bloor Homes have undertaken extensive and informative consultation that has helped to refine the proposals, and they are committed to undertaking further consultation on future detailed reserve matters applications. The proposals fully accord with the development plan and will deliver a high quality scheme providing environmental, social and economic benefits. The proposals include the retention of all veteran trees and all but 3 Category A trees, which will be unavoidably lost to form the site accesses. Bloor Homes have committed to delivering an overall net gain in tree canopy cover across the site. The existing perimeter woodland is to be retained and enhanced, and woodland walking trails, wildlife corridors and green links are proposed. There will be an overall biodiversity net gain on the site, and this will be secured in the long term through a landscape and ecological mitigation and management plan. Within the woodland at the site, 30 new bat roosting boxes will be provided, with more to be incorporated within the new houses, and 20 new bird boxes are proposed. Walking and cycling will be promoted through the provision of walking and cycling links within the site, connections to existing footpaths, and financial contributions towards the wider public right-of-way network. This development will also deliver the pedestrian crossing to the new school at Hounsome Fields, which was consented as part of that scheme. The proposals include 40% affordable homes, 20% accessible and adaptable homes, as well as self and custom build homes. A new 3-hectare neighbourhood park will be located at the heart of the scheme, connected via green links to new sports pitches, play areas, kickabout spaces and allotments. A new community building, local shops and a day nursery will be provided, set around a public square located adjacent to the neighbourhood park. The proposals include high-speed broadband infrastructure to facilitate increased home working, home learning, and enable residents to take full advantage of emerging digital communications. Electric vehicle charging infrastructure is also proposed throughout the development to support the move away from fossil fuels. As part of the Section 106 requirements, there will be an improved bus service and an £8.5 million contribution towards highway improvements along the A30 corridor.
You're just under a minute.
Which will be used to mitigate the development and to provide sustainable transport infrastructure. Bloor Homes will also be contributing directly to the new school at Hampshire Fields and to secondary education via SIL payments. Bloor Homes are absolutely committed to working with officers, members and the public to deliver this exciting new development, which will provide much needed housing, affordable housing, infrastructure improvements and community facilities. Bloor Homes would like to thank the committee for their consideration of the application and look forward to helping to create a new community on the site in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your timing as well. Members, questions to the applicant. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Alice, if I may call you Alice, thank you for your presentation there. I'm looking at our update papers. I very much welcome your stance on climate change commitment. So I welcome it. The question I have for you is, have you demonstrated this any other sites, or will this be your first?
Thank you. I've got Barry Groves from Bloor Homes. He'd like to take that question if that's okay.
Hi,
Okay, yep.
I'm Barry Groves, Technical Manager for Bloor Homes Southern. We haven't undertaken a carbon assessment on schemes before, but we have worked with a dedicated consultant in the south that does do these on a regular basis. We've been in contact with them already of what we can do, and we'll be liaising with officers going through the legal agreement and the conditions to make sure that what we're providing is what you as the local authority wish us to provide and see.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions to the applicant? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Noted in the report, there's a comment from someone that the Sainsbury's development up there benefits from power from a hot spring underground there. Have you got any intention of tapping into a power source from there? And secondly, will all your homes be fitted with solar panels, etc., as standard?
Thank you for that question. So in response to that, as detailed in the committee update paper, we have committed to, through an amendment to one of the conditions, to work with the council to provide details of things that we will be putting into the homes and ways that we will be seeking to reduce carbon emissions across the site. The exact detail of that isn't known at this stage, but we'll be working through the detailed reserve matters applications to respond on that basis.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Nope. Thank you very much, Alice. I appreciate that. They're letting you up lightly, I think. If I'll ask Councillor Golding, come forward, please. Good afternoon, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Miller.
4 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to speak this afternoon in support of this application. It's a key site in our agreed local plan. Committee members will already be aware of how important it is that these key sites are brought forward in order to support our 5-year land supply and to protect the borough against speculative development. Having said that, I do think it's vital that these large developments are planned well, which is why I'm pleased to see that feedback from the initial consultation has been taken into account as this application progressed. In particular, I'm pleased to see that the housing number has returned to the local plan figure of up to 1,000 new homes. In addition, and of particular importance to my local residents, particularly for those living already in the Fairways development, was the proposed position of the Gypsies and Travellers site. And while I appreciate that that will be confirmed at reserved matters, I'm very pleased to see that the suggested site has now moved to be better integrated within the golf club site and closer to key amenities, which is far more in line with our policies. I'm also pleased that through officers' work on the supplementary planning document and with developers, that more trees will be preserved than in the original application. I am aware that all of us value our green infrastructure as well as the practical infrastructure. So in summary, Chair, I support this application at its current stage, and I look forward to working with both officers and the developers further to make sure that the reserve matters stage progresses towards a housing development that Basingstoke can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And members of the committee, any questions for Councillor Golding? Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions, if I may. Reference was made to sewerage backing up on a previous neighbouring development. How concerned are you about sewerage considerations with this application and the neighbouring applications? That's question one. And the second one is, how concerned are you about the crossing provisions, the Toucan crossing for the school? That's question two.
Thank you. Sewering, I think, is a difficult one. I've had lots of local residents who, when they've had cameras down their drains, have seen a lot of builders' rubble down them. So I think for some people on that development, I think there is a genuine issue, and for some people, I think it's a poorly built development, and they're paying the price for people putting rubble where they shouldn't have done. I think we do need to look forward for all, like, because Councillor Jones is entirely correct. There's a lot of building going forwards, and therefore that we need to make sure that sewer infrastructure is improved. However, I'm not sure that should stop this application progressing forward at this time. In terms of at-grade crossing, I prefer subways. As an ex-Brighton Hill councillor, I expect you'll find that, but they're not considered to be the safest way of crossing at the moment. And if Hampshire Transport Authority is happy with an at-grade crossing, then I think we should consider that they have done their due diligence.
Fine. Another one, Councillor McCormick. Follow up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just finally unmuted. Would the councillor be more content to have a footbridge? Underpasses tend to be expensive anyway. A footbridge might overcome some of the concerns about underpasses like flooding or sight lines or whatever.
I think footbridges are always nice in theory until you see the plans, and actually the important thing is that we need a crossing to be accessible, and by the time you've made ramps long enough for wheelchairs to be able to get across and for pushchairs to get across, generally speaking, I find footbridges are often kind of impractical and quite an eyesore across quite a key site. However, if members wanted to push for that to be considered, I would not have an objection.
Thank you.
Any more questions to the ward member? No, thank you, Councillor Golding. Councillor Radigan.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Firstly, can I thank you for the opportunity to voice my support for this application as it becomes before you now. I would like to acknowledge the loss of this golf club if this application passes today, as I'm a keen golfer and have played many times at Basingstoke Golf Club, although of course I am not a member. I say I'm in support of this application now because when it was first submitted 16 months ago, it was frankly unsupportable. It was not fit for the unique landmark allocation that this is in our local plan. Fortunately, over the course of the last year and a half, officers, members, and the wider public have had their say to to make sure that what comes before you today is approvable by you and is recommended by the officers. The fact that we put together a comprehensive SPD, which has had the benefit of widespread support, including many of those who objected previously, is commendable. This is a highly sustainable site with a clear walking, cycling routes to connect this site to the wider community across the borough and to Basingstoke and the facilities that that provides. I welcome the resiting of the Gypsies and Travellers site away from the current settled community, but also the integration of that into the development itself, closer to the centre of the new development, where the individuals who will live there can be integrated in what they want to take part in with the settled community. Can I also say that the allocation will provide further strengthening of our local land, 5-year land supply, which in terms of protecting other areas of the borough should ensure that less speculative applications come forward while we're rewriting our new local plan. And I welcome the retention of the large bulk of the ancient and mature woodland, which was under threat by the first application. So I welcome all of these things. We need to ensure that this application meets the highest standards. But today we can do the outline, and you, of course, and the wider community will have a substantive say in the reserve matters application that will come before you. I know that you will take the time to study this and look at it supportively. But the fact that we adopted this site in 2016 in our local plan should give you the confidence that this is the right place for people who want to start out their lives in Basingstoke and Deane, or for others who want to move to something that's new and exciting with all of the infrastructure needs it has and the acknowledgement that it has a green tinge throughout it. I welcome it, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Committee, any questions to the leader? No, thank you very much, Councillor Radigan.
Thank you.
Members, questions to officers? Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. I had 3 questions. The first one is mainly about the sewerage provision, and it's on the assumption that Thames Water will do what it takes with sewerage provision, especially considering that the site slopes up towards Basingstoke, so it's going to have to be pumped uphill and then down over Kempshot Hill towards Chinham. Am I correct in making that assumption? That's question 1. Question 2 is why have we got an at-grade crossing? That does concern me, the anticipated increase in the volume of traffic, not just with this application, but we've got Hounsome Fields, we've got Longacre, and we've also got this warehouse application mooted for the other side of the A30 off junction 7, the M3, and there may be employee movements there as well. So it does seem that if the golf course is giving us £8.5 million, we might have been able to find, in amongst all the money, £1 million or two to put a footbridge in. That's my second question. And my third question kind of comes from that, which is, have the Section 106 heads of terms been agreed, or is it too late to ask for these things?
Thank you, Chairman, if I may.
Please.
I'll start with the first question around sewerage provision, and take the questions in order, if that's okay. So with sewerage, as I'm sure you'll be aware, there is a statutory requirement for the sewerage undertaker to accept waste to their network. What that means is a developer could connect to could apply to connect, and the operator would have to accept that waste. Now we have a condition that's as suggested by Thames Water here, that there isn't any occupation beyond 250 dwellings without the infrastructure upgrading works being carried out or agreed. Now, that means up to 250 dwellings can plainly be occupied. The need for the condition, noting, as I said, the legal requirement for statutory undertakers to take the waste regardless of the network, is primarily to ensure the amenities of those new residents and existing residents, because without a condition, which legally I think the developer would challenge, there could well be an impact on the amenity of residents. So the reasoning for the condition is the amenity of residents to prevent that situation. In terms of the actual provision of the sewerage upgrades, obviously the statutory undertaker has to undertake those improvements and are obliged to. The works towards designing that network enhancements normally occur after planning permission has been granted. But in this instance, the developer has underwritten Thames Water costs, so those early investigations can be carried out. So that's the reason that the change has gone from 50 occupations initially now to 250 following those further investigations. But it also means that there's been a head start with regard to that modelling work that Thames Water have been able to undertake. That is in effect the position that the Thames Water have now undertaken, or in the process of undertaking, that detailing modelling work, and understand what improvements need to be carried out to the network. And those improvements are away from the site. And I think just to touch before I finish on the sewerage provision, just to touch on, I think part of your question was to ask exactly where it's going to. You're right. You mentioned Chinham. That is the connection point. It is towards Chinham, and you also note that there may have to be additional pumping for any areas where that's required. Because of the gradient, that's right. That will be the case for part of the site, and that will have to be part and parcel of a reserve matter submission to show that there's sufficient space for that facility to be incorporated within the reserve matters submission. So that's the sewerage. The at-grade crossing. The at-grade crossing was already permitted by Hampshire Fields, so members have permitted that. It's been considered, and the principle of it agreed at Hampshire Fields. There is no mechanism within the Hampshire Fields approval for it to be delivered, and that is what this application is to secure. It's also noted that there are a number of Toucan crossings in Basingstoke, including near to roundabouts and 50-mile-an-hour roads and dual carriageways as well. I won't list them, but I think that probably members are aware of a number of them around Basingstoke. Obviously, each site also has to be considered on its own merits, which is a position that obviously officers repeat to members. Part of that, noting the Hampshire Fields approval for it already, and this committee's agreement to that, is, as you probably know, that the Highway Authority have no objection to an at-grade crossing. Fundamentally, they are the experts that consider the impact on the highway network. A bridge was mentioned as well. That would obviously need land, and as Councillor Golding mentioned, would also include additional walking distance, so it'd be less convenient, taking more time. And I think there's a risk, and I think following past discussions with the Highway Authority, there's a risk with bridges that it encourages people not to use them if there is a bridge facility, because it's quicker to cross the road, particularly around schools, and there's a concern there. So bearing in mind that the Toucan crossing is already approved, this is purely securing a mechanism to deliver that. So the principle effectively isn't for consideration here, it's already been established. And then with the heads of your third question was on the 106 heads of terms and whether they've been agreed. Obviously the applications come before you because the heads of terms are principally agreed. The 106 though is not completed, it's in draft form, and there are negotiations that are going to occur on that. So if there are any alterations or changes that members debated and found passed the relevant tests for a legal obligation, or they wanted to examine anything that is in the officer report, then obviously they'd be open to do so. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much, Greg. You okay with that? Councillor McCoy?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bound?
Thank you, Chair. I'm referencing page 126 of the report, 7.57.2, and it refers to the bus service. It would appear that the developer is putting in a subsidy for bus services for once an hour, and you're not asking for anything above that, because you don't think when the subsidy runs out that extra bus service will carry on. I don't quite see how you can be absolutely clear that that would be the situation. I can't see why you wouldn't ask for a greater bus service to be provided for the site, bearing in mind all the other building that's going on around there. And then if it was successful, surely that bus service would carry on. Why not ask for a greater bus service in the first place?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think some of those paragraphs, and I'm not sure if the quotes that you're referring to are the quotes directly from Hampshire County Council highways officers as opposed to the Basingstoke officers. But yeah, I note the area of the question. So what is proposed to be secured is an hourly service, as you note, and that's exactly the same as what was secured at Hampshire Fields. Ultimately, it will be for Hampshire County Council highways, the Basingstoke and Dean transport team, the developer, and the bus operator to agree how the service at Basingstoke Golf Course and the service at Hampshire Fields interlink, noting that they both have an hourly provision. So it could be that they interlink so that they are either the same service and it is every hour, or that they become half-hourly services if it is the same route, which is the intention that's understood. And that's the Basingstoke transport team position and preference. But it is to be noted that there is an element of commercial decision making there with the operator, and I think it's also worth noting that there are a number of other services in the vicinity as well, within reasonable walking distance towards the northeast of the site. That will be accessed through the pedestrian connection onto Beggarwood Lane and onto the Winchester Road as well to the north and straight northwest, which provides the service several times an hour. So this is in addition to that. Which may well be why the commercial view is that there isn't the appetite for it being viable for more than now, given those existing services that would also be accessible and are already there, so it wouldn't draw further patronage. It's as you'll see from the update paper, the recommendation of officers is that that provision is from 100th occupation, or around 100th occupation, although the developer's preference would be for around the 500th occupation. So that's what's being asked to be considered here. That's the officer view of around 100th occupation. but I think it's worth also noting that that is subject to final agreement and discussion between parties and the bus operator itself. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Can I just come back, Chair?
Absolutely, Councillor Bell. Go
I
ahead.
mean, it says, I mean, in this time of sort of climate emergencies and so on, surely we should be encouraging bus use rather than car use. And the report quite clearly said to subsidise a more frequent service would be counterproductive. I really don't see how it could be counterproductive to encourage a greater service. If you get a greater service, you get more usage. Surely, if that is successful, then that service can then carry on and it would help our climate emergency. It's the phrasing within the report, which apparently is also agreed by the Basingstoke sort of indeed highways people as well, in addition to the county, which seems to be an agreed standpoint. I don't agree with it.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure if there was a question there or not.
It's quite Greg to put counterproductive in
there. I think it's the position effectively of the Highway Authority. I think.
Excuse me, Greg. Mike,
yeah.
Do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bound. I think the wording is taken from the Highway Authority, and I think counterproductive. I'm sure, bearing in mind that Hampshire County Council have also declared a climate emergency, wouldn't have been meant in that terms around the impact in terms of climate emergency. I think it's more in terms of establishing, I suppose, a smaller base of public transport from the provision so that it can grow and potentially be a viable concern going onwards. So I think it's that issue that if you provide significant provision for not very many residents early on, it becomes quite quickly an unviable service if you've got lots of empty buses. I suspect that is the intention of that particular comment, and certainly not anything to do with the kind of climate emergency, because clearly the public transport offering here is quite a key element of that overall package in terms of it being a sustainable form of development.
Okay, Mike.
at the moment.
Okay. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions I've got. Again, it relates to the situation regarding highways and the impact on highways, and it's not just this application. Obviously, we had it with Many Down. Again, Many Down, we did have a representative from the county, but here, obviously, I don't believe we do. I just note that it was talking that there is going to be quite an impact on traffic. It's going to be cumulative with other sites, but it would appear that my understanding of what I'm reading is that there's not a lot that can be done about it. So we'll take it's very crude analysis, £8.5 million, and we'll put it in our rapid transit system. Now, okay, I'm not saying that's an excuse. My question is, have we been given any idea of what they are suggesting and any timescale of delivery? Because if we're waiting for this money to be gathered from many of our proposed and coming forward developments, we are waiting, we don't know for how long, and the traffic problem will go on and on. So that's the first question is there a timeline on it, and what have they got in their bag of tricks, if you like? And the second one is the situation with the roundabout. It's really just a background for me, how it's arisen that the roundabout is not there or not going to come, and it's all dependent on Hounsome Fields. But is there not a way that if whichever development comes first, it comes out of their 106 monies or whatever, and we work out of the same pot? Because if Hounsome Fields never came forward, then what would happen? So those are two questions. They're deep in there, sorry. But some information, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So the first question being around the timing of the £8.5 million. coming forward, or more to the point, once that's come forward, how it might be spent. I suppose the situation here is that the junctions that the money would ordinarily go towards are known. They're set out within the SPD. They were set out within the council supplementary planning document. They are the junctions along the A30 corridor where works are planned and the costs for those are known. And what's been secured is a proportionate contribution based on the improvement scheme costings, and that's how the level of contribution has been calculated. In terms of then how it's spent, I mean, obviously what has been put forward is a holistic approach to the A30 corridor rather than kind of the individual, rather than the money going towards the individual improvements that it actually could otherwise go towards. And that the reason for that is partly through the climate emergency for Hampshire and Basingstoke, but partly because it's what our transport, or the joint transport strategy for the area suggests. The transport strategy obviously being kind of a policy and aspirational document. So what it looks to do is set the baseline for schemes that will come forward in future. So there isn't a timeline for how that will work, but it will depend on strategic discussions between the transport teams of Basingstoke and Hampshire that I'm sure will occur. Now the contribution and what's been secured is to be flexible, so it's actually beneficial to the council and to Hampshire Highways that if those timings for the holistic review are such that there becomes a preference for money to be spent towards those junction improvements that have otherwise, if contributions otherwise been worked out on a proportional contribution basis, and those individual junctions are to come forward first, and there is a funding shortfall for them, then the money could be used towards that instead. So it gives the council and the county council the option to use the money either way, depending on the timing and the scheduling of the holistic overview of the network or otherwise. But I think the holistic overview with a mind towards sustainable modes of transport is certainly what the transport strategy advocates. I think what everybody would want to see in the future. But I note your comments about timing, and that's the reason for the flexibility in the 106. I think the second question was on the Hounsome Fields roundabout and why this development is dependent on Hounsome Fields. If you look at the plan on page 179 of the agenda, it shows the roundabout in the context of the red line application site, the orange band that runs halfway through it being highway land, and then the land outside and to the north away from the application site where the about three quarters of the roundabout is to be sited is purely within land within Hounsome Fields ownership, which is the reason why if the construction of Hounsome Fields doesn't occur, then the roundabout wouldn't be able to be constructed by the golf course because it's not on land within their control. So that's the reason for that particular element. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you for that. I'm up to speed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Potter. Sorry. Yes, Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. Question for Greg, really, if I may. I mean, as I understand it, Greg, on developments of this sort, we're encouraged under policy in terms of joint master planning not to consider sites like this as exclusive entities in themselves. And I remember when we approved Hounsome Fields, we had quite a lot of reservations and concerns about things like the crossing over the busy A30, and I take the same view as others. I think really that the bridge should be considered as a preferable alternative to the at-grade crossing, really. And with this development, I think it makes the case even more. But Similarly, as I understand it, the local education authority has said that it would prefer a school site on this site that we're considering today rather than Hanson Fields. And I remember going back to Hanson Fields, the concerns we had at that time about the school sites which were being penciled in. I mean, if that is the case, I mean, is it possible for us to get some joined up thinking here, really, where these two sites, as I say, are not exclusive and should be considered together, and therefore, if it does make sense, and the experts, county education, etc., are saying this is a preferable site for the school, that should feature within the discussions with this new applicant, should it not?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll take the first question, the second question first, if that's okay, around the school site. The location of the school is part and parcel of the Hanson Fields allocation policy. That is where the council determined that the school would go through those allocations. It is a policy requirement for Hanson Fields to have a school. A Hanson Fields approval, Hanson Fields proposal included a school that wasn't objected to. It was agreed by the local education authority, and the planning committee and thus the borough council approved the Hanson Fields development with a school. There is no policy requirement here for the golf course site to include a school or consider including a school, and it doesn't include a school. I know discussions were held outside of the application forum and alongside the SPD regarding any alternative, but that is not the proposal, and it already benefits from permission at Hanson Fields. So it's not something that can be considered as part and parcel of this application, and couldn't be something that the application was found to be deficient on in respect to policy terms. And similarly, I suppose with the at-grade crossing, that is a matter that was approved in principle by Hanson Fields. It's been considered and it's been approved and it's been agreed. The only thing that wasn't secured through that permission was the actual delivery of the at-grade crossing. And that's what this application is doing. So the principle is established, it's just the actual ability to get it built. It isn't the applicant's proposal for any bridge. And in any event, any submission for a bridge would need to include land, again, not within their control or ownership. And again, as a point I made previously, there are a number of token crossings on main roads, 50-mile-an-hour roads, dual carriageways in Basingstoke. Whilst I don't set a precedent because it's each case on its own merit, the token crossing here has been found already to be acceptable. So it couldn't form a reason for us to refuse the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Chair, could I just come back? I mean, I remember reasonably well our discussions at Hanson Fields, and at that time, the golf club development was, whatever words I use are probably wrong, but more speculative than obviously it has become over the time. And, you know, therefore we make decisions based on recommendations as best we can when we're looking at the Hanson Field development. But if what does joint master planning mean, which I understand is a obligation on us really as a development control committee, if it doesn't mean looking at two major sites of this sort which are literally together but divided by the A30, nothing more than that. If it doesn't include two major sites like that, and the logic applies that it should, what does joint master planning cover then?
If I can draw members' attention to policy SS 3.11 criterion P, which is at page 120. It's section 7.66 of your report. That sets out the policy requirement around joint master planning. and infrastructure delivery, and how Hampton Fields and the golf course have come forward with the different elements of needing to secure development across southwest Basingstoke, so the different infrastructure elements that they both include, but then also how the SPD, development brief SPD, has come forward, which also in itself acknowledges the principle for the Tootham Crossing has already been established. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Chair, so I'll leave it then, but obviously you've heard my comments there. Thank you.
Yep, indeed. Mike, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just hopefully to assist on the point that Councillor Potter's raised around joint master planning, and I think yeah, the report seeks to set that out in terms of the response under criterion P of SS311, and thinking about that kind of broader framework around the sort of planning decision. It includes obviously the golf course SPD. Now you'll recall that Hampton Fields application came before an SPD for that particular site, and it actually came before the local plan. I think the key issue here is that the SPD for the golf course, which obviously builds upon the local plan allocation and the kind of work that had already gone in at that stage to ensure that the two sites marry up, if you like, in terms of kind of some of the key infrastructure around things like the access, the distribution of different facilities on each part of the road, if you like. So the school on one site and then the crossing facilitating. And in summary terms, I suppose the key part about that joint master planning work has been to ensure that you know, all elements are covered and each site delivers what is achievable within its site, on the basis that there are two sites clearly in two land ownerships. That joint master planning, I think, has been successfully woven into this application, and as reported in the officer's report. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor George.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I noticed that Councillor Jones in his discussion came up and mentioned the nitrates issue and what have you. My understanding from what Greg mentioned is frankly that all the sewage effluent is going to go over to Chinham and therefore will not impact on the Chinham test, which is very, very welcome. It really is, and what have you, it's very, very good. In fact, looking at it, we've got a position here where if we replace the golf course with housing, actually, and the sewage goes outside, we may actually end up with a net contribution here, and in terms of reducing the impact of nitrates in the test catchment, which is quite interesting. So it may be very positive in that respect. And I'm just wondering, my gut reaction is that I know there's still a little bit of nitrate generation purely from, should we say, housing activities, but it sounds as if it's a very positive contribution to the whole argument. I'm just wondering, has this been quantified? And if it has been quantified, is this something we can consider to offset other potential developments in the Test Valley? That's my first question. The second one I've got is really I very much welcome this whole issue of monitoring of the CO2 emissions and the positive contribution to that. And I noticed the changes to condition 6, which is excellent. And I also note that Law for Housing, as Alison Davison mentioned, is wanting to work very closely with Basingstoke and Dean and the officers to try and implement green technologies and everything, which is very good. I would, however, say that, and I'm guessing this is the one that we've taken directly from the Manydown conditions, but it's
sorry, Councillor George, what's your question?
I'm getting there very quickly. Is very simply is we're looking at these. It is slightly different here in that we've got tree loss and things, and I'm interested. This is very much about quantifying the positive impact, but what I'm thinking about is other things here in terms of tree loss and things like that. Should we not be looking at net overall carbon contributions rather than purely quantifying the positive impact? And secondly, you mentioned monitoring. I think these submissions are going to be made at the reserve matters stage. Where's the monitoring element going to come in there? You know, surely monitoring should be taken or conducted on a regular basis to make sure that, you know, as things move ahead in the design, we can quantify the whole process of monitoring. So that's my question.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the nitrates and the nitrate impact, that is something that was certainly raised by and discussed with Natural England, something they were aware of. And then, as you say, with the connection to Chinham, rather than to the south for the foul discharge, they have no objection and haven't raised that in their consultation comments. In terms of any net gain in terms of nitrate impact, I don't think that's something that can be quantified, because I don't think that we could quantify necessarily what type of fertilizers are used on the golf course in terms of nitrate, phosphate, and the amount that is used in any given season either. But I think that the point here is there is no planning harm being caused, as the foul waste is being taken towards Chinham, so therefore there isn't an impact on the test or Itchen, and that's the solent. In terms of CO2 monitoring, you're right that the monitoring for the individual calculations would be at the reserve matters stage, and the details will be provided at reserve matters stage. In terms of measuring net overall impact, I think that would be a difficult thing to be able to do, and obviously what we're trying to do is maximise the benefits. You know, obviously the part of the net impact would be the removal of trees, but actually the proposal is for a net gain in terms of tree overall canopy cover following the amendment to condition 10. So what we're looking to do is measure the enhancements and maximise the enhancements. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor George.
Thank you. I very much understand the position there, but I still would welcome a much broader assessment. And I noticed that Alice Davidson and her advisors did seem to suggest they'd work with you to try and basically try and quantify some of these things. And certainly, whilst you know, trees and what have you are an issue, there's a time lag and time delays, there's impacts and then offsets. And it's that overall monitoring program which I think is important. So could I just ask that maybe once you get into detailed discussions with Laura on this, you can you know, look at that and come up with overall monitoring of the process so it can be monitored. In terms of nitrate impact, there are standard methods of looking at this, and in fact I think Natural England have published some. So you know, I'm just wondering where, and certainly there is an overall benefit, and I'm not I'm just saying that in this case it seems to be an overall benefit. I'm just bringing that to light. I think it's a positive thing, but it would be good if it be quantified, just so we could see if it's possible for offset. Because, you know, we have some planning issues with nitrates in the Test Valley area.
Thank you, Councillor George. Mike.
Thank you, Councillor Chairman. Yeah, just on that point around that Councillor George has raised, I mean, I think the condition is certainly trying to be geared, I suppose, to be particularly around construction. I take the point entirely that obviously carbon impact is a wider issue beyond just the buildings themselves. And I think, as you say, you've heard from the applicant today about their commitment beyond anything in the planning permission itself, and clearly that the importance of that additional informative that we are drafting to respond to the full council motion around encouraging applicants to effectively go beyond things that might otherwise be required by the planning permission at this stage. So I think we can certainly maintain that dialogue and that discussion following this committee's consideration.
Thank you. Any more questions to officers? Debate or a question, Mike?
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to ask Greg to perhaps tell us a little bit more about the site. Appears as though it's going to be very noisy, particularly adjacent to the A30. The noise mitigation measures which are mentioned within the report, there are not going to be acoustic areas. How exactly is this going to work?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think you're quite right to note that the site is constrained by noise. It's the same situation as obviously when the site was allocated. It was allocated on that basis. Obviously, there's been consultation with environmental health on the submission, whose advice is that 1,000 dwellings can be delivered at the site, obviously subject to mitigation. And I think there are two elements to that mitigation. The first is the mitigation, kind of the site mitigation. So the use of barrier blocks, so continuous blocks of built development that provide a physical barrier restricting noise, and then localized barriers, so acoustic bunds or fencing or walls, if that is necessary, noting that the original submission was for a notable amount of acoustic barriers, but that's not now the proposal. There's been a notable change in that respect, and there'd only be localized use if strictly necessary. The kind of the site-wide mitigation is to be controlled through the reserve matters and through conditions, and certainly then the second part is the mitigation measures that are to be secured through a condition again for individual properties. So once you have a property that is within acceptable noise limits or capable of being within acceptable noise limits, you need to be able to obviously establish what mitigation is therefore needed if the noise levels are above that which might cause a harm, might be noticeable to residents when windows are open. So there's a level at which that needs to be established, and then the actual mitigation measures to how you might otherwise get air into those properties if they are unable to open their windows is also subject to planning conditions. There are conditions covering off all of those different elements, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. Okay, Mike.
Unmute.
You're muted.
I understand in principle how it's going to work. I just hope that the science behind it all is going to actually work. I mean, using buildings to deflect. I was going to ask Greg how buildings actually deflect, but what about the people in those buildings? I suppose this comes into the reserve matter stage.
Yeah, effectively it does. Obviously, the first point is the distance. Or the further the distance of any building is away from any noise source, the less the impact. There becomes a point where the distance is enough that, together with mitigation, that you can achieve acceptable levels, and that will be key, obviously, at reserve matters stage, that being demonstrated and established where that first block of development can occur. In terms of how that actually then works for occupiers of those barrier blocks, then that comes down to the specific design as well as the layout. So the actual individual properties, and I understand from the developer that these will be bespoke buildings, so you can have effectively a designed building that doesn't have any noise sensitive rooms facing the noise source, or manages to minimize the use of noise sensitive rooms facing any noise source. So staircases, kitchens, effectively, so there's voids between the noise source and the actual habitable rooms, which works very well. Thank you, Chair.
Fine, I'm going to move into debate, and I've got Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I've looked through the report and all the sort of public comments and councillors' comments and that, and I've listened to the speakers, and it's fairly obvious there are a lot of sort of concerns to be ironed out at this, at reserve matters, but nobody who's spoken today has actually put up a fundamental objection to this development. So on that basis, I move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Do I have a seconder for that? I'm not going to, don't worry. I've got Councillor Potter. I'll take that as a seconder, but I'm going to continue on with our speakers because it gives you a chance to express some views. But I have a...
Thank you. Sorry, are you saying for me to speak now or not? Sorry, I beg your pardon.
You're seconding the motion, aren't you?
I am. And
fine. Do you have anything to add at this point, or do you want to sum up a bit later?
well, very little really.
Okay.
Councillor Robinson said what I would have said, I think, anyway. The only observation I wanted to make very quickly, I am pleased to note the intention that's been underlined under climate change and the initiatives that are being taken there. I mean, I think we're making small steps, and I look forward, obviously, to the informative note which might accompany. We've got to get that right, by the way, and I think Mike Townsend made this point at the beginning of the meeting. Really, it needs a bit of thought about it, exactly what that says, if it's going to have any legitimate basis to it, really, as an informative note. What I would want to say clearly is that given, I hope, when we approve this outline application, we are really talking of a development of up to 1,000 housing units and no more than that. There's wording within the thing which talks approximately. Well, I don't want that. I mean, this is up to 1,000 units and no more than that. That's my view, and I think that should be the very clear decision of this committee if it reaches that conclusion. Thank you, Chair.
To give you some assurance, Councillor Potter, on page 19, first page, item number 1, up to 1,000 homes, category C3.
I saw that and I read it, and it's just that if you look at some of the other observations, and with respect, there are words like approximately used even in the main body of the report, which probably is unnecessary, I think, really, although that could be approximately, but it could be a few less than 1,000. I understand that. Bit of tautology on my part, but as long as we're all clear about what we're approving, no problem. Thank you.
Yep. Greg wants to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to pick up on that point, really, that the application is for up to 1,000 dwellings. I think any reference to approximately comes from the allocation policy. This proposal is now for up to 1,000, so that is what members are considering, and it wouldn't allow further dwellings beyond that.
Thank you for that confirmation. Councillor McCormick, it's been probably moved and seconded, but I'm going to get Councillor McCormick to have a say.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I was considering seconding this motion, but some hands shot up before mine. I mean, all in all, I think it's a fairly reasonably demonstrated application. One of the things I would say is there is kind of a lack of policy guidance regarding the climate emergency and green issues. I was trying to scour the LGA website while this application was going on, and I couldn't find much. We could really do with the SPD that the council motion asked for. We could do with it right now. But be that as it may, I think there's a lot to commend this application in terms of the 40% affordable, 20% access and adaptable. The sewerage, initially I was a bit concerned about it, but I think the onus is going to be on Thames Water to come up with a solution, which almost certainly will require pumping. I mean, the only thing that does give me a little bit of cause for concern is the at-grade crossing and the fact that we as a committee have approved it in principle through another application. So I can't really object to this on that basis, really. My hands are tied. But it was interesting to note Dummer Parish Council had flagged concerns on that, and the local county councillors' submissions on page 51 as well. And I would suggest that we take this issue offline and pursue it by other means with Hampshire County Council. We've got a meeting with them tomorrow on Brighton Hill Roundabout, and that kind of opens up discussions on the whole A30 corridor. But I think there is a point to be made about how busy that road is, especially when we're going to have kids crossing it to go to school. But I don't think that on its own is sufficient to refuse this application. So I would be supporting it, although not entirely satisfied with that. But I think all the other aspects of it are fairly sound.
Thank you for that. Members, it's been properly moved and seconded for approval. I'm going to go through the roll call. It's probably easier if we all unmute. Bernie, can you unmute everybody?
I have still got my hand raised on there according to this.
Oh,
There's something wrong with my machine.
I don't have electronic hands up anywhere on my screen.
Just went down.
Maybe I have the
just
wrong
now.
screen selected. I have to have everybody so I can see them. If you want to say something, Councillor Court, please do.
Oh, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I did put my hand up fairly early, but don't worry, it'll probably only repeat everything everybody said, so don't worry.
Oh, well, I apologise if I missed you on that. I saw your hand go up to second the motion, but there were 4 hands went up. Do you want to say something?
I did, and I waved my hand as well to second it, but
Well, yes. Moved and seconded for approval. Councillor Court.
4.
Councillor Leeks.
4.
Councillor Robinson.
4.
Councillor Goodison.
4.
Councillor George.
4.
Councillor Grant.
4.
Councillor McCormack.
4.
Councillor Bound.
4.
Councillor Potter.
4.
And Councillor Tomlin.
4.
Thank you very much. It's approved. Bernie.
That was 10 for the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Officers.
Thank you, Chairman. Just confirm that is delegated to officers for Planning Commission as per the agenda and update paper in accordance with the conditions and 106 obligations in the agenda and update papers and subject to the completion of the legal agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, officers and members, and I bid you good afternoon.